product lifestyle. As you can see, there are a lot of marketing decisions to make, and one critical factor is where you are in the product lifecycle. Here you can see the typical stages in sales curve that are used to depict the lifecycle. I'm looking at a graph. On the y-axis, it says annual sales volume. On the x-axis, it is divided up into 4 parts. 1 is introduction, 2 is growth, 3 is maturity or stabilization, and 4 is decline, and it's labeled as time. And the graph goes up slightly in introduction, a little bit more in growth. It plateaus in maturity or stabilization, and then it goes down in decline. The reference is labeled Wiley and Sons. A lot of thought leadership in marketing comes from people who manage products at the maturity stage. Often these products are consumer packaged goods from companies such as Procter & Gamble. At this stage, there's a strong emphasis on competition and cost cutting to drive up profit margins. There's also a heavy emphasis on massive brand marketing campaigns rather than demand generation campaigns. But for many go-to-market teams, the context is completely different. You might be working with products at the introduction and growth phases. At these stages, you often don't need to focus very much on competitors. That is because the market is growing and can support many different competitors. Moreover, brand awareness may be so low that customers just aren't aware that you even have competitors. And on top of that, cost cutting may also be less important. One reason for this is that growth will come from other sources, such as expanding revenue in a growing market. Your target in this case, early adopters, are also often less price sensitive, so you can make up for high expenses with high prices. In these stages, massive brand marketing is less relevant. You and your competitors probably haven't built up the economies of scale required to invest in TV campaigns, for instance. It's also worth noting that in the early stages of a product's lifecycle, it can be difficult to have a strategy at all. The product may change rapidly to accommodate whatever market signals you receive. You don't have a lot of data on customers, and it's difficult to define what your target market really is. What's more, your value proposition may not even be all that different from your competitors. I'm a huge fan of strategy, but I must admit that in the early stages, trial and error can sometimes be more important than strategic planning. Identifying and analyzing competitors. A key factor in selecting a market is understanding the competition. This is a 2-step process. 1, finding your in-market competitors, and 2, finding and understanding your audience's competitive alternatives. Then, you're in a good position to develop compelling value propositions and messaging to drive your go-to-market strategy. Step 1, identify your in-market competition. This is probably the easiest step. The first kind of competition is the one we're familiar with. It's the companies and solutions you lose to after your target audience has decided to spend some money on the problem. So your first step is to identify who the competitors are within your chosen market category. Sometimes this is easy. However, there are probably competitors who you're not thinking of or who you haven't run into during your sales cycles. Fortunately, there's lots of ways to get this information. Use tools like Crayon to track competitors. Use tools like SpyFu, Google Keyword Planner, SEMrush, or Moz to identify competitors based on their online content and advertising strategies. Look at category groupings on review sites like G2, Capterra, Yelp, or Google Reviews. Hire people to research for you on Upwork or Fiverr. Review other organizations' web presences with tools like SimilarWeb. Review your existing data and identify who you're losing deals to. Does anything unite the deals you lose to specific competitors, for example, size, industry, etc.? And complete win-loss analyses with your prospects. Who else did they look at during the sales cycle? Once you have a list of competitors, you need to start analyzing them. First, look at the competitive advantage each competitor has. Competitive advantage basically boils down to just 2 things. 1, economies of scale, and 2, customer captivity, for example, churn rate. Estimate economies of scale by collecting data on your competitors, such as the number of employees, revenue, venture capital funding, and social media followers. If you aggregate all of these, you can get a sense of their scale. To assess customer captivity, you want to look at things like subscription models, cancellation penalties, customization packages, and personalization options for their products. All these options make it more difficult for customers to leave. And from your perspective, that means your competitors are making it more difficult for you to capture their market share. After looking at competitive advantage at the economic level, I then look at competitors in terms of marketing strategy. Here you want to look at things like what target customers the competitors are going after and how they are communicating value to these customers. Look at their websites to see which verticals or industries they are targeting. Look at how they talk about their value proposition. You will get a sense of the positioning they are trying to use to secure in the market. The third level I look at is tactical. Look at their pricing, packaging, product features, functionality, and anything else that could be relevant, such as advertisements. The downside of this kind of analysis is that it can be endless, so you want to stay focused on the top competitors you've identified. To find this kind of information, start by scouring review sites and discussing these issues with your prospects. These conversations can be a goldmine for this kind of tactical information. By talking to people who have been through sales cycles with other companies, you start to get a sense for where those other companies focus and what they pitch as their value proposition. If you're lucky, you might even get a sense of how your prospects would respond to your product offering, and you can start to shore up your position against those objectives. The best way to help structure this analysis is a framework like the one below. This will give you an idea of market presence, quality of service, and why people do or do not like them. I am looking at a sample table with 7 rows and 4 columns. The rows are labeled competitor, domain authority, SEO Moz, site traffic rank, SimilarWeb, rating, G2, positioning from reviews, ease of use, G2, and specific product weakness. And the columns are labeled A, B, and C. Competitor A has a domain authority of 47, a site traffic rank of 100,000, a rating of 4.0, positioning from reviews is intuitive, ease of use is 6.5, specific product weakness is 2 times more expensive. Competitor B has a domain authority of 37, site traffic rank of 500,000, a rating of 3.0, positioning from reviews, fast and easy, ease of use is 10, specific product weakness is doesn't integrate to Salesforce. Competitor C has a domain authority of 55, site traffic rank of 900,000, rating of 4.9, positioning from reviews, affordable, ease of use 5.5, specific product weakness, low internal adoption. The first step is relatively straightforward. What's more challenging is mapping out your competitive alternatives. Step 2. Identify your competitive alternatives. Competitive alternatives are what your audience would do if your product didn't exist. I like to think of it this way. If someone was solving the problem you solve without buying you or any of the competitors you've identified, how would they do it? For example, let's say you make marketing automation software. Your competitors might be HubSpot, Marketo, and Pardo. Your competitive alternatives might be not doing email marketing, sending emails manually, or only running email marketing through sales cadences via the sales team. Or say, for example, you make running shoes specifically for running on treadmills. Your competitors might be Nike and New Balance. Your competitive alternatives might be swimming, other cardio gym activities like rowing machines, stair climbers, etc., barefoot running, or other less specialized footwear. Finally, let's say you're going to market with a new video game. Since you're primarily offering fun in exchange for time, your competitive alternatives are every other fun way someone could spend time. This includes other media such as TV, Netflix, etc., hanging out with friends, or hobbies or classes. When you think about the customer lifecycle, competitive alternatives tend to come first. Before Netflix came along, for example, their customers were perfectly happy renting DVDs from a local store, until Netflix convinced them that on-demand streaming was what they really wanted. So the first thing you need to do is convince your target audience that they need what you're selling at all. Then, once they're in market, you need to convince them that your product is the best. Remember, you don't define the competition or the market, your customers do, which brings us to the issue of product or market fit.